If you have been told you have diabetes or prediabetes, there is a very good chance that someone at some point told you to be careful with fruit, or maybe even to avoid it altogether. And if that happened, you are not alone, because this is one of the most common and most damaging pieces of oversimplified advice that people with blood sugar concerns receive. The truth is that fruit is not the enemy, and in fact 3 specific fruits, when eaten in the right way, have nutritional properties that can genuinely support healthier blood sugar levels rather than spiking them. By the end of this video you are going to know exactly which 3 fruits those are, why each one works the way it does inside your body, how to eat them for the best results, and one important mistake that most people make with fruit that cancels out all the benefits. Stay until the very end, because the 3rd fruit on this list is the one that surprises almost everyone, and it may be the most powerful of the 3. Before we get into the fruits themselves, let's take a moment to understand why fruit gets such a complicated reputation when it comes to diabetes and blood sugar management. The concern with fruit is that it contains natural sugars, primarily fructose, glucose, and sucrose, which can raise blood sugar when consumed. But here is what that oversimplified concern misses entirely. Whole fruit also contains fiber, water, antioxidants, and plant compounds that dramatically change how those natural sugars behave inside your body compared to the same amount of sugar from a processed food or a sugary drink. The fiber in whole fruit slows the digestion process, which means sugar enters your bloodstream gradually rather than all at once. The water content dilutes the sugar concentration. The antioxidants and polyphenol in many fruits actually support insulin sensitivity at the cellular level. This is why research consistently shows that whole fruit consumption, in appropriate amounts, is associated with better blood sugar management in people with type 2 diabetes, not worse. The key is knowing which fruits to choose, how much to eat, and how to eat them. The first fruit is berries, and this category deserves the top position on this list for reasons that go significantly deeper than most people realize. Blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries are among the most blood sugar-friendly foods that exist in nature, and not simply because they are lower in sugar than many other fruits, though that is true. The more significant reason is the exceptional concentration of compounds called anthocyanins in dark-colored berries. Anthocyanins are the pigment compounds responsible for the deep blue, red, and purple colors of these fruits, and they are among the most studied plant compounds in the context of diabetes research. Multiple studies have found that anthocyanins can improve insulin sensitivity in a way that helps cells respond more effectively to insulin, which is the core issue in type 2 diabetes. When cells respond better to insulin, glucose is cleared from the bloodstream more efficiently after meals, resulting in a lower blood sugar spike from the same amount of food. One well-known study found that regular blueberry consumption was associated with significantly improved insulin sensitivity in adults at risk for type 2 diabetes. Another found that people who consumed the most anthocyanin-rich foods had the lowest risk of developing type 2 diabetes over time. Beyond the anthocyanin effect, berries are also exceptionally high in fiber relative to their sugar content. A cup of raspberries, for example, contains around 8 grams of fiber alongside only about 5 grams of sugar, making it one of the most fiber-dense, sugar-dilute fruits available. This fiber content is critical because soluble fiber, which is found in significant amounts in berries, forms a gel-like substance during digestion that physically slows the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. Think of it like adding a speed bump between the sugar in your food and your bloodstream. The slower glucose enters, the smaller the blood sugar rise, the less insulin demand is placed on the pancreas, and the more manageable your overall blood sugar response becomes. Berries also have a relatively low glycemic index compared to most other fruits, meaning they produce a slower and more moderate blood sugar response even without considering their other beneficial compounds. The practical recommendation is to aim for a cup of mixed berries per day, and to eat them as a whole food rather than as juice, which removes the fiber and concentrates the sugar in a form that enters the bloodstream much more quickly. The second fruit is apples. And this one surprises many people because apples are not typically thought of as a diabetes-specific food. But apples have a combination of properties that make them genuinely valuable for blood sugar management when eaten correctly. The most important of these is a specific type of soluble fiber called pectin, which is found in particularly high concentrations in apple skin. Pectin is one of the most effective natural substances for slowing glucose absorption, and its mechanism is similar to what we discussed with berry fiber but even more pronounced. Pectin forms a particularly thick, viscous gel during digestion that significantly slows stomach emptying and glucose absorption, producing a notably gentler blood sugar response than many other carbohydrate-containing foods. Research has found that consuming pectin-rich foods before or alongside a meal can reduce the overall blood sugar response to that meal, not just from the apple itself but from the other foods eaten at the same time. Apples also contain a polyphenol compound called chlorogenic acid, which has been studied specifically in the context of glucose metabolism. Chlorogenic acid appears to interact with the way the gut absorbs glucose and the way the liver produces glucose, both of which are relevant to blood sugar management in people with diabetes. The liver in someone with type 2 diabetes often continues producing glucose even when blood sugar is already elevated, a process called hepatic glucose production, and chlorogenic acid has been investigated for its potential to support the regulation of this process. Additionally, apples have a moderate glycemic index that is further lowered by their fiber content and water content, meaning a whole apple produces a significantly gentler blood sugar response than apple juice or applesauce, which have both lost much of the fiber and in the case of juice also concentrate the natural sugars. The key recommendation with apples is always to eat them whole, with the skin on, since the skin is where the majority of the pectin and polyphenol are concentrated. The third fruit, and the one that surprises the most people, is avocado. In botanical terms, it absolutely is a fruit, and it deserves a place on this list because its nutritional profile is uniquely suited to blood sugar management in a way that is quite different from the first two fruits we have discussed. Avocado is distinctive because it is extremely low in sugar and carbohydrates while being exceptionally high in healthy monounsaturated fats and fiber. A whole avocado contains less than 1 gram of sugar and roughly 13 grams of fiber, making it one of the lowest sugar, highest fiber foods available in any food category. This combination means avocado has essentially no direct blood sugar impact on its own, but it does something arguably even more valuable when eaten alongside other foods. The healthy fats and fiber in avocado significantly slow the digestion of whatever else is eaten in the same meal, which means that adding avocado to a meal that contains carbohydrates can noticeably reduce the overall blood sugar response to that meal compared to eating the same carbohydrates without avocado. Research has specifically supported this effect. One study found that adding half an avocado to a lunch meal significantly reduced the blood sugar and insulin response to that meal compared to the same meal without avocado, even though avocado itself added calories to the meal. Another study found that people who regularly ate avocado had better overall blood sugar control and better cholesterol profiles compared to those who did not. Avocado is also rich in potassium, magnesium, and B vitamins, all of which play supporting roles in insulin sensitivity and energy metabolism. The practical recommendation is to eat avocado daily, either as a standalone snack added to salads or eggs, or as part of a meal that contains carbohydrates where you want to reduce the blood sugar impact. Now let's talk about the most common mistake people make with fruit that cancels out every benefit we have just discussed, and it is this: eating fruit in processed or juiced form instead of whole. When you drink orange juice instead of eating an orange, you are consuming the same natural sugars from the fruit but without the fiber that would slow their absorption. The result is that the sugar from juice enters your bloodstream almost as quickly as soda, producing a sharp blood sugar spike that is the exact opposite of what happens when you eat the whole fruit. The same principle applies to dried fruits, which are essentially concentrated sugar with dramatically reduced water content, meaning a small handful of raisins contains far more sugar per bite than a full cup of grapes. Smoothies present a middle ground, since they retain the fiber from the whole fruit, but blending breaks down some of the fiber structure in ways that can speed up digestion compared to eating the whole fruit, And smoothies also often contain multiple servings of fruit that would be difficult to eat whole in one sitting, leading to higher overall sugar intake than intended. The second common mistake is eating fruit at the wrong time or in the wrong combination. Eating a large amount of fruit on an empty stomach removes the buffering effect that other foods provide, allowing the fruit's natural sugars to be absorbed more quickly than they would be if eaten alongside a meal containing protein, fat, and fiber. For people with diabetes or prediabetes, pairing fruit with a source of protein and healthy fat, such as eating berries with Greek yogurt or an apple with a small amount of nut butter, significantly softens the blood sugar response compared to eating the fruit alone. Timing matters too, since eating fruit earlier in the day rather than late at night tends to produce better blood sugar outcomes for most people, because insulin sensitivity is generally higher in the morning and early afternoon than in the evening hours. Portion size is also worth discussing carefully, because even the most blood sugar-friendly fruit will produce an elevated response if eaten in very large quantities. The appropriate fruit portion for someone managing diabetes is generally one serving at a time, which might be one small to medium apple, 1 cup of berries, or half an avocado. Eating multiple servings at once, even of low glycemic fruits, adds up to a meaningful carbohydrate and sugar load that can challenge blood sugar management. This does not mean fruit needs to be restricted to tiny amounts, but it does mean that awareness of portion sizes, spread across the day rather than consumed all at once, is an important part of using fruit beneficially as someone managing diabetes. Let's also take a moment to talk about some of the broader research on fruit consumption and diabetes risk, because the population-level picture is actually quite encouraging for those worried about fruit. Multiple large-scale studies following hundreds of thousands of people over many years have found that higher consumption of whole fruits is consistently associated with a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, not a higher risk. One major analysis published in the British Medical Journal found that people who consumed the most whole fruit had significantly lower rates of type 2 diabetes compared to those who consumed the least, and that certain fruits including blueberries, grapes, and apples showed particularly strong protective associations. This large-scale evidence directly contradicts the oversimplified advice to avoid fruit for blood sugar health, and it underscores why understanding which fruits to choose and how to eat them is so much more important than avoiding fruit altogether. It is also worth understanding how the gut microbiome connects to fruit consumption and blood sugar management, because this is an area of active research that adds an important layer to the picture. The fiber in whole fruits, particularly the prebiotic fiber in berries and the pectin in apples, serves as food for beneficial bacteria in the gut. When these bacteria ferment this fiber, they produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids that have direct effects on glucose metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and inflammation throughout the body. A gut microbiome that is well-nourished with plant fiber and polyphenol from whole fruits tends to be associated with better blood sugar regulation over time, while a microbiome depleted by a diet low in fiber and high in processed foods is increasingly associated with worsened insulin resistance. This gut-blood sugar connection means that eating these fruits consistently benefits blood sugar management not just in the hours immediately after eating them, but over the long term through their effects on the microbial ecosystem of the digestive system. It is also worth spending a moment on the role of antioxidants and inflammation in the context of diabetes, because chronic inflammation and oxidative stress are now understood to be central drivers of insulin resistance rather than just consequences of it. Many of the most damaging effects of type 2 diabetes on blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, and eyes are mediated by oxidative stress and inflammation. The antioxidant compounds in berries, apples, and avocado directly counteract oxidative stress and support anti-inflammatory pathways in ways that address the disease process at a more fundamental level than simply managing blood sugar numbers in isolation. This means that regularly eating these fruits as part of a comprehensive dietary approach contributes to a more favorable internal environment for managing diabetes overall, not just in terms of immediate glucose response but in terms of the long-term inflammatory and oxidative stress burden that drives the progression of complications. Before we close, it is important to be clear that this video is for general educational and nutritional awareness only. It is not a substitute for personalized dietary advice from a registered dietitian or medical guidance from your doctor. People managing diabetes, particularly those taking insulin or other blood sugar medications, should discuss any meaningful dietary changes with their healthcare provider, because changes in diet can affect blood sugar levels and medication requirements in ways that need to be monitored. The 3 fruits discussed in this video, berries, apples, and avocado, are supported by nutritional research as beneficial choices for blood sugar management, but individual needs and health circumstances always take priority over general recommendations. If this video gave you a clearer and more practical understanding of how to use fruit as part of a diabetes-friendly diet, please share it with someone you know who is managing diabetes or prediabetes, because this is information that can genuinely improve someone's daily food choices. If you found this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to Dr. William Heart Health for more videos like this every day.